Hi, everyone. Welcome in. We'll get started in just a minute. Okay, I think I'll wait 30 more seconds for a few people and then we'll get started. Great. So welcome everyone to the Cash Accounting Office Hours. We're super excited to have everyone here. I will jump right in. So the agenda for this is we'll talk a little bit about the new Cash Accounting Analytics reports and do a short little demo of them. But the bulk of this hour is going to be with Q&A. And the people who are on the Q&A are myself and Dorothy. So I'll introduce myself really quickly. Hi, I'm Elisa. I'm on the product team here at LeagueApps, and I've been working on analytics since its inception. Dorothy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dorothy Kolb, and I'm a fractional CFO and that works with quite a number of youth and adult sports organizations. And I've been working with LeagueApps on off and on getting this thing rolling. So here to answer questions as best I can.
Thank you. And we're very happy to have Dorothy here. We also have Maddie on the call, and she also is on the LeagueApps products analytic team. So at a high level, I'm going to just talk a little bit about cash accounting processes, and we're going to get into Q&A in a couple of minutes. If you have any questions before we get into Q&A, please put it in the Q&A box in the Zoom controls, not in the chat box. So there's a box that's called Q&A. It's a perfect tool for you to use. So the cash accounting reports are in LeagueApps Analytics, and they were released last month to all partners. So everyone on this call should have access to these reports. They allow you to download data off of LeagueApps, export it to a CSV in a way that's formatted like journal entries so that you can easily import that file into whatever financial, accounting, bookkeeping tool you use, whether it's QuickBooks Online, Desktop, Sage, or whatever else. We really wanted these reports to accommodate you and meet you where you're at. So it's not integration, it's just reports that you can then download and upload into another software. So I'm going to jump over into a demo. And one other thing to notice is that this is about cash accounting. It's not accrual accounting. And so Dorothy can explain a little bit later about the difference if anyone wants a refresher on that. But if you use accrual accounting, we will have accrual accounting based reports in Q3. So there's 3 quick things I'm going to demo. If you haven't been to analytics before, or if you haven't played around with these reports, then now you'll get started and see them for yourself. So I'm going to jump over into a demo organization. So this is my management console. And to get to analytics, you go to reporting, and then under analytics, you'll click reports. So here, this loads all of my reports all at once. And I'm an org account admin, so I see everything across all of my organizations. To see the 3 new accounting reports, I'm going to open up the cash accounting dropdown, and you'll see the 3 here. We have the bank transfer journal entries report, the individual journal entries report, and the summary journal entries report. So I'll start with individual. This report allows you to track undeposited journal entries on an individual basis across your organization. And it's also meant to work in conjunction with another report that I'll show you in a few moments. As you can see here, each one of these 3 lines is meant to be its own journal entry. And so the data you see in the journal number is corresponds to an invoice ID and transaction ID. So for a program or product, the transaction that comes through that would be a separate journal entry. The journal date is the date of that transaction, and then the 3 lines here, they all correspond to different accounts and the amount that should go into those accounts based on the transaction. So there's the undeposited funds account. This is a bad example because that one didn't have any fees. So let me scroll to here. The undeposited funds account, this is the amount that your organization actually receives from the transaction. The merchant fees is the amount that goes to fees. And uncategorized income is the amount that was actually paid on that transaction. In the case of individual journal entries, the description is the name of the program. If it's a grouped program, then it's the name of the group, dash the name of the subprogram. If there's a class that's selected in the program settings, then that would show up here. And then the memo is the bank transfer information. So if I want to see all of the journals for the past 30 days, if I only want to see certain sites in my organization, or if I only want to, I know exactly what journals I want to see, then I can select them here as well. And then I can export this off of LeagueApps with the 3 dots, export, and then to a CSV. Using that export, I can then import it to whatever tool that I use. The other type is summary journal entries. So if you don't want to have one journal entry correspond to a single transaction, then you can group transactions with matching income accounts and classes into a singular journal entry. And so the journal number corresponds to the entire bank transfer ID. You have to be using LeagueApps Gateway for this because it's based on bank transfer information. And the journal date is the bank transfer. There's a lot of lines here because there's a lot of different matching income accounts and classes. And also this is on an organization level. If I only want to view one singular site, I can just filter it down to that, and this makes it a little bit easier to see what I'm looking for. And here I can see the undeposited funds. Again, this is the total amount that the organization would get for all of the transactions in this bank transfer. Merchant fees and co-ed, this is for all transactions that have the co-ed class. These are the fees associated with that. For all transactions in this bank transfer that have no class, these are the fees associated with that. And then there are 2 different income accounts in this journal entry. One is uncategorized income, meaning that there was no income account selected for the programs or products associated with this. And the other is uniform income, meaning that there was, for at least one transaction, uniform income was the income account selected in those settings, as well as the class of co-ed. And the memo also has the entire bank transfer information as well. So again, you can export this if you'd like, or you always can schedule send. So I could send this to myself or my bookkeeper directly, and I can schedule send it on a regular basis so that every day or every week at 9 a.m., my bookkeeper can get this in their inbox so that they don't have to bother you for these reports. The last one is bank transfer journal entries, and this is meant to be used in conjunction with either individual or summary journal entries. And here it's just flipping the undeposited funds into the bank account. So the journal number corresponds to the bank transfer information. So you again have to be using LeagueApps Gateway. And then the undeposited funds is the total amount that the organizer, received, and bank account is that same value, but now flipped over into your bank account. So those are the 3 reports. I know I ran through that at a really high level, but I was trying to just give you a light little lay of the land if you haven't seen these already. We have a lot of very in-depth support articles, which I'll get to a little bit later in this session if you want to see this in more depth. So now to the bulk of it, it's the Q&A section. So this is your opportunity to ask myself and Dorothy anything about the cash accounting reports. So it's good to have these be more general questions, and you're going to put them in the Q&A box. So rather than go off mute, I ask everyone to put it in the Q&A box. Some good questions to ask are something like, why should I use individual journal entries instead of summary journal entries, or vice versa? Why do I need to use the bank transfer journal entry report? My organization uses accrual accounting. Are these reports still valuable for us? If your question is too specific or hard to answer in this format, I'd suggest that you reach out to support@leagueapps.com, or Dorothy, and her email is here. But put all of your questions in the Q&A box now. And Andrea, I see you raise your hand, but please put your question in the Q&A box. That'll make it easier for us to go through. While more people put them in, Dorothy, you're able to see the questions as well.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay. So the first one, do you want to take that?
Yes,
I guess
that might be for you, but I don't know what MoneyMinder is, but I would say if it can take a CSV import into it with information, then you'd be able to import this data into MoneyMinder. Anything else on that, Elisa?
No, it's all meant to be import export. It's not about connecting to any specific account, as long as your tool allows imports. And if it doesn't allow imports, then the data is formatted in a way that this should be a lot faster for you to manually type things out.
Yeah. Rosna, undeposited funds is not accounts receivable. Undeposited funds, we kind of elected to put it in there so that if a deposit for transactions on a particular day, for some reason, which it won't, but for some reason didn't show up in your bank account, you would be able to see it in undeposited funds as, wait a minute, LeagueApps said I was going to get this deposit. I never did. So you can always just refer back. It's kind of a holding account until the deposit actually makes it into your bank, and you can check it off on your bank account. This might come up if you have other transactions where you have made a deposit and QuickBooks, for example, will match it. We'll say this is what we suggest as the match because they have found it in your transactions and it corresponds to that. This will do the same thing, but undeposited funds is just kind of a holding place until money that was promised to you that was already sent. Accounts receivable means they haven't sent it yet. Undeposited funds means they've sent it, but it just hasn't hit your bank account. Think of it as the old days when somebody would, when you would get a check in the mail and you'd have it on your desk and you might put it into undeposited funds until your assistant takes that check to the bank and actually deposits it. Going back to old school. Andrea, I don't know if this is, I don't know what you're doing originally, so we might have to circle back to that. I'm just going to go down these. Okay, Lisa, Anthony, I think this is new. The one of the issues we were trying to tackle was being able to identify these bank transfers, because sometimes they come over, at different times, and it's hard to figure out which ones correspond to which transactions correspond to which bank transfers. So that's why this kind of helps that part of it. And that should help a little bit for your accounting department, because if you have it mapped correctly in LeagueApps to whatever your accounting software is, that summary or the individual transfer report will identify every single class, every single program that you have that's mapped to a class. So that's where you would find that mapping. And then the overall deposit would tie out to the bank transfer entry. So it's kind of like a two-part, but yes, that the individual or the summary transfer entry will be identifying what program or / class that revenue came in for, as long as you have it mapped that way in LeagueApps. MoneyMinder.
Let me just interrupt you for 1 second. We're going to go through all the Q&As in the box, and at the end of that, if there's anything that was too difficult to type out, you can raise your hand and you can go off mute at that point, for anyone in the chat who would rather vocalize their questions. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. You might have to answer James's question with
Yes.
the back at MoneyMinder again.
So the question is, MoneyMinder can't accept CSV, only QuickBooks and Quicken Files is the only plan output CSV at this time. That's the CSV and Excel or the and PDF are the only versions of file types that can be exported. But we can look into that in the future.
There you go. My bank transfer has multiple programs and I need to book it into each program. The summary journal entry will provide that as long as it's mapped that way from LeagueApps. So as long as you have all your revenue mapped the right way, you know, so you have, and as long as everything that's in LeagueApps is a class in, I'm going to use QuickBooks Online right now. Same thing happens for Xero if you're on Xero. As long as it's mapped that way, then it will come over with that information in that CSV. This is on QBO. I've tried to do summary and reconcile cash. Ooh, this is a lot.
Do you want to read it out loud?
Yes. I've tried several times to use the summary and the other reports to reconcile cash. However, no combination of these reports match deposits. I have to import entries by transfer ID and match the transactions to the deposit that way. It's a lot of pivot table work. I'm an advanced pro advisor. Let's see. Well, well, maybe Elisa, you can help me with this. The bank transfer, either the summary or the individual journal entry will book basically your revenues and your merchant fees to undeposited funds. The bank transfer entry should recognize your undeposited funds to a deposit in your bank. Now, I think the only question here is there any time that multiple deposits would be combined by LeagueApps into one deposit into someone's bank?
One complication I could hear potentially is if you're using multiple sites are all connected to one bank account. I wonder if that might be messing it up. I'm not sure. There shouldn't be anything happening in LeagueApps that isn't recognized in these reports. All of the transactions are going to be either for programs or products. And if you're using summary journal entries, then that all gets grouped into a journal entry.
We might have, yeah, we might circle back to that at the end. That this is for you. Are we able to add more fields to the report?
Faith, I'd ask that you put that as a in all of analytics at the bottom. There's a submit feedback button. Whatever fields you'd like to see that aren't here already, please put that in the submit feedback so that we can look into adding those fields.
And Danny O'Gallagher is just trying to get me on one of these questions. I know Danny. Okay, yes. So the difference between individual and summary journal entries is great question. The individual journal entry, the individual amount, individual journal entry one will give you every single registration as its own little, revenue, merchant fee, undeposited funds, revenue, merchant fee, undeposited funds for every single transaction. The summary will summarize it by program. So if you had 15 people registering for softball, instead of seeing 15 individual entries, you'll see one, and you'll see the sum of all those registrations for softball or whatever program you have going on. That's the main difference. My input here is, if you don't need that information in QuickBooks on an individual basis, don't drag it over, because all that data is living in LeagueApps. So there's not really there are some situations, I'm not going to say blanket, there's never, but it's more likely than not that you just need the summary information in QuickBooks and leave the detail in LeagueApps. It'll make your QuickBooks or your Xero or your Sage or whatever less bulky with all this data, and leave that data over in LeagueApps. So it just summarizes it by program. Hopefully that answers the question. And if not, you know where to find me, Danny. Can you name income accounts? You had an income named uniform. How? Yeah, those income accounts are going to be named in LeagueApps and then mapped to whatever accounts that you have in your accounting software. So you just have to make sure that they are the same. I think that's the biggest.
Yeah, and I'll add to that what in your LeagueApps setting, like site settings, you can add more using the income account terminology option. So income account one and income account two, or sorry, accounting code one and accounting code two. You can add options within those and then tag the programs or products on your site. If something doesn't have a tag, that's when it shows up as uncategorized income account.
Yay, thanks, Anthony. I needed that right about now. Currently, I am downloading that transactions into QBO. I'm then looking at the bank transfers in LeagueApps and splitting the transfers into the correct income. Yep. On the payment information manually. Yep. This is hoping to get rid of that process for you. Can the mapping be done based on the summary? Yeah, of course. Yeah, you're going to map all your everything that is coded. Like I said, everything that's coded, and I might have answered this in the last one. Everything that's coded in LeagueApps, as long as it's mapped to something in QuickBooks, it will come over that way. The only time it'll end up in uncategorized is if it doesn't have a home in QuickBooks. So just look at your income accounts, your chart of accounts in QuickBooks, and look at what you've got in LeagueApps and make sure they all are exactly the same. And if something ends up in uncategorized, you would just need to go back to LeagueApps and say, what was this? Yes, class and yep, Andrea, yes. Andrea, sorry. Nat, we're back. It doesn't recognize, yes, we get 2 deposits daily. We have 2 sites. Oh, okay. So, Lisa, you might have to tackle Nat's. They get 2 deposits daily and they have 2 sites. Yeah.
Nat, these journal entries, they would combine, if it's one bank transfer ID, then it would combine across your sites all on that singular bank transfer ID. For example, this org that I'm looking at right now has a lot of sites. And it's so like all of this is for, you see like all of these different sites over here on the right. So it's formatted to put everything in one. If this doesn't work for you, one option would be setting up a separate LeagueApps Gateway account for each of your separate sites, which you can work with the support team on. If you don't need to do that, then you can also just filter down to each of your specific sites here. You could change the journal number if you need. You can try to play with the format based on like the constraints of having one singular bank transfer ID across your sites.
You're going to make me say Andrea or Andrea wrong again. The bank transfer journal entry that's not going to be the one that gives you that by program. That's just going to move it from undeposited into bank. What will is either the summary journal entry or the individual journal entry. Those are the ones that are going to give you the revenue by program, by class. So that's really the important one. If you're like, I don't want to do all these, either do the summary or the individual journal entry, and then you can always match it separately. But the detail coming into your books and the right revenue accounts is going to be in those individual or summary journal entries. Can you advise again the external programs recommended for partnering, like QuickBooks, etc.? Oh, do you mean like other than like QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, Xero, Sage? What were the other ones that you had? Anything that can take a CSV import either directly or through a third party. I know QuickBooks Online will often go through like a SASANT, SAASANT, I think it is, that will to put it into QuickBooks language. QuickBooks is very annoying with that. And the other, I think Xero will take a CSV import, just no problem. QuickBooks Online, I think you need a third party to turn it into QuickBooks code.
I can answer the next one. Who can help me understand how to do mapping in LeagueApps? In a few slides, I'll show you a support article which runs through like how to set everything up in your sites to make these reports work as good as possible. They're very in-depth support articles, so I encourage you to like really follow it step by step. If those support articles don't answer your question, then email support@leagueapps.com, and anyone there can help you.
Yep. Mapping by class. Yeah, that would be mapping it from LeagueApps and those programs like we were talking about before, making sure all your programs in LeagueApps are classes in QuickBooks Online. If that's, I'm assuming you use QuickBooks Online since you use class, or the same thing in Xero or anything else. You have to make sure that they are identical in both places. Yes, and then Andrea, the bank transfer report, exactly. That's just going to have one large number. Again, you're going to want to take the detail is in the summary transfer or the individual transfer. That's where your revenue is going to be broken down. How do you update class? That's a you.
Yes. So I'll just show it. Maybe that might be the easier way. So this is again all laid out in the support article, but just really quick in LeagueApps. If I go to my site settings, if I go to site settings and then go to terminology, down here there's these two accounting codes. The first one you should label it as class, and the second one should be labeled as income account. That's the best way to make these reports really serve you. And then in terminology options, here's where you can add the possible fields, like basically whatever's in your QBO, they should be available here. So that's how you do the mapping, is you see whatever you have as a class option in QBO or whatever accounting software you use. You add each of those classes here, and then you add each of the possible income accounts that make sense for the programs and products in LeagueApps here as well. And then for a program, you can tag it by going to the program details, and then here you select a class or an income account from the list that we just built off of. If this is not clear, please consult the support articles.
Yeah, okay. The summary entry, yeah, it actually will. I mean, the summary program, it will give you everything that was in that transfer, that bank transfer to you, and it'll give it to you in every single revenue or income code. Oh, sorry. my fireworks. I'm so excited about this. My fireworks are going out. It's usually that or balloons all the time. I'm like, okay, whatever. Thanks. Yeah, Zoom. I'll keep my hands to myself. I won't talk like a New Yorker. But yeah, the summary entry will give you all the revenue accounts by program, as long as you have set that up between LeagueApps and QuickBooks. It will match your bank deposit, as long as, you know, sometimes there will be like we were talking about before, if you have multiple locations, there might be two deposits that go over at once, but it definitely will allow you to see what the transfer was at that point and how much in each revenue category. Needs a screen share. Yeah, maybe you can, Nat, maybe you should, this might be a little bit beyond our scope on this call. So you might want to get in touch with support and see what you have to, maneuver around to make this work for you. So just hope my clearing account. Yeah, actually, Andrea, that's exactly why we have to go into undeposited funds, because you want to make sure the undeposited funds zeroes out. And if it doesn't, that means something either was combined or didn't make it to your bank. And that's a key point why I was a huge proponent of putting it in undeposited funds, because otherwise you might not find it until the end of the month or when you're reconciling your bank account or whatever. This way, if it's sitting out there and you look over it and you go, what the heck, why is there money in that? It'll flag you to go, okay, I have to look into this a little more. It's kind of like a little mini internal control for yourself. Individual journal entry doesn't show program ID code. That would be
Erin, that's a
Lisa.
great thing to put in the submit feedback button, since yeah, we couldn't predict every field that someone would want when we were building these. So please put that in the submit feedback button on any analytics page.
And then when can we expect LeagueApps to add more class fields?
I'm not totally sure I understand what this question means, Faith. So you might need to come off mute at the end of the Q&A list. But the classes you add yourself. So everything that I showed you here in the terminology options, these are all, you add an item. It's whatever is for you. So for my organization, these are the classes I needed, but you might have something very different, or you might have no classes.
Yeah, so I recommend, you know, at the beginning of every season that you have, if you are, you know, if you have multiple seasons during the course of the year, that you run a list of what's in, look at the list of what's in LeagueApps for classes, and look at what's in your QuickBooks Online for classes, and make sure that they are the same. And, you know, that way you always have, if something comes in for something, it always has a home in QuickBooks. But that, yeah, that's something that you would have to handle. LeagueApps doesn't add that stuff in for you. Looking at our bank transfer journal entries, and the description doesn't show me, well, this, it wouldn't be in description, it would be in your, this is again gets to your, as long you have to have your all the sports or programs mapped to a class in QuickBooks in order for that to happen. So Anthony, take a look at, again, what you have as classes in LeagueApps, what you have as classes in QuickBooks, to make sure that they are all aligned.
And I'll add
and
that,
when you're in each program, right? When you're in each program, you have to make sure that program is mapped to that class. So that might be
yeah, and I'll add that for the bank transfer journal entry specifically, the description is always just bank transfer journal entry. It doesn't say the full list of all of the programs that comprise that. That's meant to be more for the individual or summary journal entries.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, that one too.
Are there any more written questions before people start raising their hands? Looks like we, Dorothy, you really flew through the.
I was trying.
Mile a minute.
I know time is of the essence for everybody on their lunch today.
So if anyone has any questions that they felt were answered, or you have more questions, please raise your hand, and then I will figure out how to unmute you. Okay, I think Faith, I'm going to allow you to talk.
There we go.
You should be able to speak. Okay, I think if
Faith can speak now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. No, what I meant in the class fields is when you took us, Alyssa, to the terminology page. So you have class, and then there's other things, but we use Sage Intact, and it requires like a minimum of 5 different types of fields: location, department, the GL code, which you guys satisfy. You have 1 class field, and then we have an item code as well. And so with ours, we actually have to customize the name of the site with numeric coding in there to put to show us what department and location for these, for these different sites, because we have tons of sites as well. And each of those, and now that we've got multiple sports, trying to be registrations for multiple sports being put in one of these like sites that maybe is for baseball, and someone in performance comes in and puts in a camp in there, that it's posting errors all the time. We have to post journal entries to fix. And so I've constantly been asking, is there at least 2 more fields that we need? We need at least 2 more, because we've had to retrofit a couple of the other ones. I think we use program code for one of them. You guys have GL code, so that's good. And then the class code we use for for that specifically as well. But we're missing, like I said, two specific ones that we could use in that.
So Faith, you're looking for like two more basically open
yes,
text fields, is that right?
yes.
Got it. Okay, so I would put this as a support request ticket. That it's not totally analytics based, so that's why I wouldn't say do the submit feedback button. The
Mhm.
support request ticket would be the best place to put this request so that the relevant team at LeagueApps can look into adding some more fields.
Okay. Yeah, because I've asked this for the past 3 years that we've been with you guys. So
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I will try to make sure that someone sees this request sooner.
okay, thank you.
Thanks. James, I am allowing you to talk. I'm very new to this, so I think you have to go off mute now.
Thank you for the gift. Can you really quickly go back to what Faith was talking about? If you can go back to the screen that you had, just so that I want to make sure that I'm setting mine up. We're very new, so we're excited to be here. So ours, we just run volleyball and pickleball, and then those are our two leagues. And then we also do events like draw tournaments and such for those as well. So under my class section, what I run volleyball, pickleball there. And then under my income account, what I run registration, volleyball, registration, pickleball, event, draws, etc.
Yeah, yes. I would consider if you don't, I mean, if you're planning on getting bigger and adding more programs that are not just volleyball and pickleball, I would consider just having registration revenue and then denoting it by the class instead of putting multiple line, revenue line items. So if you think of it as like a spreadsheet, instead of going in rows, you'd have registration revenue, and each type would be a column going across. That would be your class.
Okay.
It helps save for your chart of accounts down the road of becoming unwieldy, because now you've added 10 different programs and each one has a revenue line.
Right.
It can get a little confusing like that, but otherwise, yes.
So just registration revenue would be my income account, and then my classes would be all the programming that we offer. Perfect.
Yep.
And then my last question, if you don't mind, and you may not answer this right now, we could take it offline, but I did message a support service specialist. How do we set up where we're going to be sending our money out to, our income account to send it out? Is that something that we can cover here?
Do you mean like within LeagueApps, like the LeagueApps Gateway bank account, that kind of thing?
Yeah, because I've not had that class yet.
Got it. I am probably the last person who can help you with that. I honestly do not know.
That's fine.
Someone on support
Send a message to my
definitely
support
help.
specialist. That's
Yes,
super.
that's great.
Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any more questions from anyone who would like to come off mute? Going once. Going twice. Okay, great. So if you had a question that is just now coming to you, or it comes to you in the next, after this call, then if you have any more questions. Oh, Andrea, just in the nick of time. Okay, Andrea, yes, I will allow you to talk. And I think you can unmute. Okay, there you go. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm really old school, so like having to
Oh,
do
no
the text
worries.
box is always so hard for me. Dating myself here. I'm going to meet with our registration pro, the guy who sets up the programs. So what we've been doing to date is actually just taking that bank transfer, and you can go into Gateway and you can download the transfer. I do one transfer a week, so we have 4 a month. And then I can look at the programs and actually split by programs, because we don't use class for the different programs. We actually have different categories. We actually use categories to have the different types of programs, and we put many programs like competitive leagues or recreational leagues and things like that. So this using kind of clearing account concept of undeposited funds is sort of it's kind of adding a layer to it. I know that I get everything because I map it up, but you're right, now it'll be in QuickBooks. So yeah, I guess we'll follow up with, I'll follow up with our LeagueApps rep after I meet with our registration pro, and we'll figure out how we leverage this. But it's great to see you guys are finally looking at the back end administrative side of it where we've needed help. So thank you.
So you've kind of built your chart of accounts like vertically instead of like I was just talking about to James, is you have a revenue line for every program rather
major
than
classes
revenue
of programs. Yeah. Because then when I run my financials, they can see how much are we making in the major league. Ours is all soccer, so MLS versus our competitive league versus our recreational league versus our adult league. And so those are each categories of versus using class. So I don't use class a lot, and so I have to figure out how we can map that together. And so I don't think Tevin, who does our sets up our registrations, has been using it either, because I went in and I have LeagueApps, my LeagueApps open, and even on the summary, it's all going into one line item. Yeah, so I think we'll have to figure out how we use classes in LeagueApps to have a breakout. I'm not seeing the differentiation even in my summary journal entry. It's pretty much one line. And I know that's not quite right. So I think we have to just figure out how to use LeagueApps more effectively. So in that summary journal entry, it'll break out competitive versus MLS versus rec versus adult and things like that, right? Versus academies, things like that. So
within the classes in LeagueApps.
Yeah. So I'm thinking aloud, but thank you for giving me a chance to.
Because if you do that, if you have it like a revenue, like a class in each one for the competitive MLS, rec, whatever, they'll come over as separate line items. And they might all go to one income account, which then you'd have to manipulate that on your side, but at least they'd be identified. So you could go in this deposit, this is how much was should be in that MLS line. Let's say it was 10 grand, 2,500 for MLS, 2,500 for rec, 2,500 for competitive, 2,500 for somebody else, little guys. And so you'd see those individual line items. So that might help you a little bit if you have the classes set up that way in LeagueApps. That might help you get a little
like
more
I said, I don't think we've been using that capability at all since it didn't, it's like, what's that field for? We don't use it, so I populate it. So
it might save you a lot of time.
I know. Well, we finally did figure out how to map the bank entries to the program. So that took a long time. A couple of years ago, one pivot table a week is all we asked. Anyway, thank you for focusing on the back end, because a lot of these, I'm always on the back end side of all of these programs, and it's like, but I need to be able to look at my bank like how much is coming into my bank and know what it's for.
Exactly.
Like, well, why?
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, and then I see Matt. I'm allowing you to talk.
Matt's back.
And you should be able to unmute.
Oh, that's quite a picture. Anyway, Andrea, I really want to get your contact info because you do exactly what I do. Hopefully you're not in the DC metro area and we don't compete. But at any rate, what Andrea was talking about is exactly what I was talking about. Because we have daily transactions, but the only way I've been able to match is to get and identify what is in a specific deposit is to do this pivot table work. And I shouldn't have to, because it seems super simple on the programming side. And I say that having worked in IT for 20 years, to create a journal entry based on transfer ID. So you have
which is I think what we're doing.
Yeah, well, I'm not finding it. So I have to go out and find the do all the data by transaction ID and do a sort based on that, and then I can go into my subcategories. Now maybe I'm wrong, but
I think the summary, I mean, as long as you don't, either the summary or the individual journal entry will give you that information and split it out by, it'll give you the one bank transfer ID, so you know it's that deposit, and then it'll split it out among all your program revenues, as long as that's how you have it set up in LeagueApps. And then you don't need to do all the pivot table because it's basically doing the pivot table for you.
Well, that would be the perfect world, and I would love that. Maybe I just
So see, like if you see the screen that she just opened up right now, if you can actually, can you get out of that thing for a second? Like, no, just scroll over so he can see. Like if you had keep going. Okay, so that's the site name. So if you have individual sites, you would have the site name in there. But under the class, if there were classes, I'm like scrolling with my hand. I'm such an idiot. You know, for all these where it says 2020 CEBB, whatever your particular programs are, those would show up there. So each line would have, you know, income and merchant fees broken out by program.
What are this transaction group based on? Because if I do addition on this transaction group, say it's by, you know, it has nothing to do with date. Okay, so that if you do a transfer date on this group of transactions, it, you know, if I do a frequently the transfer date doesn't match what's in. I mean, if I do it by transfer date, I don't get a number that matches what the actual deposit was. It only works if I use it by transfer ID. So that, you know, so if you have multiple transactions that coming in by credit card, different credit card companies do it, you know, post at different rates and different speeds. So you have one transaction that posts tomorrow and another transaction that posts next week. Same transaction date. So that's what was. Now, that being said, I don't know LeagueApps at all well. So I may be doing it the wrong way and having a wrong approach. And I've tried talking to our account rep about this. She's like, and has no idea what I'm talking about.
Are you using the LeagueApps gateway for your processing?
Yes.
Or are you using?
Yes.
Because then the transfer ID, Elisa, would be the same for everything that came over that day, correct?
Yes, that's the only way you can do it. So date kills it. So date doesn't work. It used to work, but it required more pivot table work. So now that I've found transfer ID, that requires less pivot table work.
Well, what about using, but this is what, and if you use these reports, like if you ran this for, you know, what
I have not, I mean,
okay.
I've looked at this and I couldn't make it work this way. Now maybe I just need to try again and again until I get it right. But anyway, and the last time I went through
and
this,
since you're exporting it into CSV and not directly integrating it into your accounting software, you can look at the journal entry first and go, okay, does this make sense? And then bring it over. So, you know, that's kind of a benefit of not, you know, one of the benefits of not having it just completely integrate, because then it's in your books and you're like, well, crap. But this way you can look at it first and go, okay, does that?
And I've tried to do that, and that's where the whole, I mean, but we may have 1,000 transactions in one day, and so it gets pretty, you know, bulky. Well, at any rate, I will give this another effort with our rep, and especially since I talked to them about it before this big change. So there may be more information, but what I'm getting from the programmers, or what she's getting from level 2 support, is it works. And that's the only answer I got. And I'm like, okay, that's not helpful, but we'll try again.
Okay. Well,
anyway, thank you for letting me vent.
Yeah.
And appreciate you guys coming on and taking all the slings and arrows that we can throw at you. So
it should work, Matt. It's fine leaving here. I don't know what you do once you get it. No, I'm just kidding.
That's right. All right. Appreciate your help.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Nat. So for anyone else, if you have any more questions, either for LeagueApps or for Dorothy, sorry, stumble over my words near the end, then please reach out to support if you have specific questions. But I really encourage you to read through the support articles. They're very in-depth. There's a lot of videos. There's a lot of information and prerequisites of how to set everything up. This will be emailed out to you after this recording, and so you should get the link in your inbox as well. If it's something that Dorothy can answer better than anyone at LeagueApps can, then her email is here. It's dorothy@dkeast.com.
Yeah, try to send me more of along the lines of the like accounting and finance side of stuff, and not like if you send me something about, you know, how does LeagueApps, you know, utilize this information to do this or whatever, I'm gonna have to put you back to support. So I'm not that
exactly.
integrated.
Well, thank you everyone so much for coming and for staying on. I hope this was a great session for you all, and I appreciate you all taking the time.